It's our pleasure to have Monica Hernandez Alarcon, Human Resources Director, Africa and Middle East General Motors. Monica has held the position since September 2020, beginning her career at General Motors in 1999. Monica has held different positions in human resources at the manufacturing complex in Toluca, Mexico, and the Regional Engineering Center After Sales and Customer Service area, and the central office is located in Mexico City. Her areas of expertise include talent acquisition, planning, labor relations, compensation, efficiency of organizational structures, diversity and inclusion, data analysis, and talent development. Our next speaker is Priyaranjan, Group CHRO, Landmark Group, specializing in HR strategy and HR transformation. Priyaranjan has been with Landmark Group since 2022. He has over 3 decades of experience in the field. His experience includes stints at AXA XL, IFFCO Group, G Capital, and Tata Steel, to name a few. The moderator of the panel discussion is Mr. Karthik Ekambram, Executive Vice President and Director, DEI Solutions, Avtar, a diversity and inclusion specialist who has completed several seminal projects successfully for various organizations. His experience in business analysis, talent strategy, and workforce diversity consulting. He has devised flexible working policies and created diversity-ready workplaces for several Fortune 500 organizations. He has co-authored several papers that have been published in the journals of national and international repute. He has been conferred the Diversity Leadership Award by World HRD Congress. So as the discussion happens, you can share your queries in the chat window. The panelists will answer them for you. Over to you, Karthik sir.
Hello, hi Janani. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this interesting panel discussion. And we are also proud, and it's a privilege to have Priyaranjan, the Group CHRO of Landmark, joining us in the panel discussion, and Monica from General Motors, part of the panel discussion. It's a pleasure welcoming both of you to the panel. It is going to be a very interesting conversation that we are going to have, and on the backdrop of the what you heard from Dr. Soundarya Rajesh, from Ms. Shubha Barry, and Anju actually presented about the study. Just to give you a quick context in terms of the study itself. The study, as mentioned by Anju, was launched in 2016 in India, and almost 35 years back in the Gulf. The entire purpose of the study is to ensure that we have organizations like you there who are participants who are watching this particular panel discussion, from GM, from Landmark, who are truly invested in diversity, actually coming together to share their data, share best practices, share their learnings for the common interest to build a DI environment and culture where everyone, irrespective of their background, irrespective of the identity they have, they're able to actually come, succeed, and thrive in the organization. So that's the fundamental purpose of the study. The study really helps organizations to sort of benchmark, track through progress, set goals based on the kind of impact that we're able to have. So that's the entire focus of the study. And today, with the panel joining us, we are really going to talk about what is the present landscape of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Gulf, in specific at General Motors and Landmark Group. That is something that we're really going to focus today. We are also going to look at what are organizations in Gulf actually looking at, how are they approaching the entire aspect of diversity. And we all know the Gulf is truly diverse. You have not just from a gender perspective, I think from ethnicity, from nationalities, the Gulf, and specifically the UAE, where we have both the speakers from. If you walk into any organizations, you'd probably have more than 40, 50 nationalities actually being represented there. So it's a huge challenge and a great opportunity for diversity to actually sort of thrive and succeed. So today we are going to have the privilege of hearing both from Monica and Priya Ranjan as to how are they managing this rich diversity that is there in their organizations. What are some of the challenges that they really see? What can be done to really overcome some of these challenges? And how do they see the future of diversity in Gulf is something that we would like to hear from them. Once again, Monica and Pierre Ranjan, it's happy and a pleasure welcoming you both to this panel discussion today. Thanks once again for joining us. I just want to start off this conversation with requesting you to give your opening remarks on this topic, specifically on the aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you see this, uh, your own personal perspective? You both have a rich experience. Priya Ranjan, I think your experience is ranging from different industries, right? Not just the retail, I think financial services and various other industries, and also geographies. I see that you've been in Singapore, in France, in India. I think you've also seen the diversity at different geographies as well. And same with Monica, while you had a long stint with General Motors, but again, coming from North America, from Mexico, and then being here at the UAE and the Gulf, if you could share your opening remarks on the landscape of DEI in the Gulf and in your views, how is it different from some of the geographies that you really work with? Monica, I'm going to request you to sort of give the opening remarks.
Thank you so much, and a pleasure to be here. So it won't be fair to compare the Gulf to America, because I think that the development and the arrival of industries and this global approach arrived earlier or started more into the that part of the world. Still, what I can say is, in my experience since I joined GM, I have been looking into how we develop, and the willingness of inclusion has been there always. But we needed to fight more with biases, with social constraints, right? And all those wins that happen in Europe and in America at some point in history, then they spread out into the rest of the world. And these movements, these social movements, really what they were trying to do was to raise the voice, and raise the voice in a way that it's not only to be equal, right? All these fights started more as an equality thing. But now we see that we're adding on the inclusion and truly why we're doing it, which is the diversity. So now what I see is that now all sides of the world, we are aligned in what we want to achieve. The progress might be different, because also there are social implications and beliefs that we need to honor, right? You cannot fight history in a blink. You need to also make changes slowly. So people feel comfortable, because diversity is not something that is going to be given. The diversity will be a given, but not the inclusion and the equity, right? So what I see in the Gulf in my 3 years here is that definitely there are efforts not limited to hiring. And it's nice to see how even the government is supporting these initiatives. And they are open to have private sector supporting, and even us learning from them and them learning from us, which is an honor for us to be in certain forums, and to not only invest in female talent because they are joining General Motors in this case, or they are already with us. We're also working with the government in order to influence on what these girls, future professionals, future ladies working with us or any other company, or even in the public sector, that there are no limits. And I think this is something that we need to be always like ambassadors, especially in industries where it was traditionally meant or traditionally perceived as a male industry, which is true because of the number of people studying in the universities. So that will be my 2 cents on how I see the region.
Thank you, Monica. And I think what I hear from you is uh, what started as a social movement, right? In some part of geography, it's actually now much more accepted, widespread, and it's become an imperative. To us, in many cases, it's become an imperative to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's no longer a movement in the sense when the time that you referred to, Monica, right? So it's become an imperative today, and with a lot of focus on ESG as well now. I think there's a huge focus on ESG and diversity, one very important component of the S factor of the ESG, right? So it has become an imperative. So in that, I think there's been a lot of progress that has happened, as you rightly said, Monica. And one interesting point is the progress may not be the same in different geographies, right? It could be different ways, and this is something that we would love to hear from you as well. How is the Gulf actually doing in comparison?
Mhm.
Something as we discuss go on further. And one of the things that you also mentioned is in this aspect of progress, every industry is also going to be different, right? When you look at the retail, it will have, for example, Landmark, right? It will have its own set of challenges. But again, GM in an automobiles manufacturing engineering kind of an environment, the challenges are much more different as compared to somebody in a tech space or in the banking financial services space. So it also needs a very customized way of looking at it, a focused solution feature of the challenges. And therefore, what we are also looking at is in the Gulf, then how are we really going to look at a strategy, a process, and a plan in place so that we are able to. And Monica, another point that we heard from you is that there is also a strong government support now in
Mhm.
terms of looking at diversity, not just with gender. I think there is also this huge focus on people with determination, right? That's
Correct.
another aspect of diversity. There is a lot of focus in the Gulf, but so exciting times are ahead in the Gulf. Actually, the environment, the opportunities are so conducive for diversity and inclusion to really thrive. Thanks a lot for your opening remarks, Monica. Priya Ranjan, we love to hear from you. Landmark is one of the largest retail chain in the Middle East, right? And therefore, there's a huge, I think, kind of knowledge and experience that you have, right? As an organization itself, operating in the Middle East for so long, having your presence in India and other geographies as well, and with your own experience, Priya Ranjan, your view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, please.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I think let me just make one opening statement, which I firmly believe. Diversity for me or for anyone is a statistic, and inclusion is the culture or the soft or the emotion.
Yeah.
So I think we need to just make sure that we understand what is the statistics and what is the emotion. And inclusion, which is the emotion part, which is the, let's say, the so-called softer part, is much more difficult to attain, much more problematic to get. And I think that's where the organizations have to take a much, much larger portion of their bandwidth in terms of capacity of thinking as to how to build a equitable and an inclusive culture. To your point on the Gulf region, I think as Monique also alluded, I think the journey on DNI for Gulf started slightly later compared to the other parts of the geography that we have been accustomed to. Especially if you see the US and the European markets are fairly, let's say, mature and highly advanced in this respect. But I would say that with the foresight that the government of UAE has shown and has had, they have been very, very quick to catch up with what the other parts of the world was doing. So, be it the establishing of the Department of Tolerance in 2015 or 2016, whenever that happened, or the Happiness Department that they created, or the focus on people with special determination, apart from, let's say, the gender. I think the government has taken in the Gulf region, especially I would say UAE, a very, very strong step to ensure that there is a very fair, equitable, and a balanced society that they create in the community. The second thing which has happened is if you see financial institutions in the Gulf region, they have been very clear that if they have to, let's say, lend support to any organization of any kind, they are now very clear that you have to show what are the progress that we have made on diversity in order to avail of, let's say, better interest loans from the financial institutions, for instance. So I think there's a pressure from, let's say, the government to do better. There's a reality of the business that is also featuring in the minds of the business leaders in the Gulf region. So I think the let's say the focus on D&I has over the period of the past decade been quite strong in the Gulf region. Well, all the focus, has it really translated into meaningful results? Maybe not in across all the sectors, all the industries, but I would gather that at the current moment, every business leader or most of the HR leaders or most of the D&I leaders are fairly clued on as to what needs to be done to improve the matrix on D&I. So I think it's a journey. We are at the journey stage where the understanding is very pronounced. I think there's a strong intent to make things happen. Many organizations have already taken steps to make things happen, and now we have to see the results in the near future or in the, let's say, foreseeable future. But I feel very optimistic and confident that with the right focus and the push, we can really create a community or an organization culture where DNI is really supported and pronounced. And I'll talk more about as we go along in what we are doing as well in the retail sector.
No, thank you so much. I think you actually set a very positive tone in terms of, the future is bright. I think the private sector, the organizations, the corporates are equally invested as much as the government. And we know the kind of the influence, the kind of the directions that the government can actually do, and not just in the Gulf, I think in every part of the world, right? Because you need both actually working, the corporates actually doing it and the external part of it, right? The larger society, the policies and the policies of the government actually sort of, assisting, enabling the companies to corporates to really sort of do whatever that they want to do in whichever area, and more specifically in the space of diversity. I think that's a very positive thing for the Gulf, Priya Ranjan. And I think you also started with a very opening remark in respect to diversity is all about numbers, statistics, and the inclusion is emotion. Therefore, it's more of the quality of the experience that everyone actually has, when they are part of the organization. uh, yes, diversity may be easy in some industries, like Monica mentioned. In some of the manufacturing, diversity is tough, right? But inclusion is much tougher. It's more difficult because it is just not about a one-day experience, right? Inclusion is just not about one-day experience. You walk and you feel. It's actually an experience every day, right? Every minute that you're working in an organization, and therefore it really involves building a very strong culture, right? A culture of respect, irrespective of the differences, the background that people come from, respect for the different thoughts and beliefs and values that people bring in, uh, respect in terms of the things that they can actually do in the organization, right? And therefore, inclusion is a challenge, but at the same time, if you can really make the inclusion work, then the kind of impact that it can really have in the organization is going to be immense. And we probably would like to also touch upon the kind of impact that diversity has done for your respective organization. We're happy to hear that as we go along. So, Priya Ranjan, you spoke about the entire aspect of the statistics. You spoke about the emotions, and I really would like to take your views on how do you look at this? Sometimes we talk about this chicken and story, which comes first, right? The diversity comes first, or the inclusion comes first. So how do you approach this, Priya Ranjan, as if any organizations, let's say, is sort of, planning to start on its journey, what would be your recommendation? Look at diversity first or look at inclusion first?
So I think my view, Karthik, is that inclusion has always been there as a, let's say, lodestar for organization. And therefore, I think the thinking has to be that what is, first of all, the organization doing on inclusion? And inclusion, as I said, and again repeat, though, because it's a tougher thing to accomplish, the the leadership of the organization has to be really focused on ensuring that the inclusive culture is created properly and the steps are taken properly. Now, if you look at the Gulf region, a large part of the statistics on diversity, and let's say I'm talking about gender for the moment, let's say stick to gender or nationality, is a byproduct of what the talent supply is in this market,
Okay.
right? So I may be very, very clear that, okay, in certain industries, you may get women to work, in certain sectors, you may not get. And you also know that there are certain nationalities that come and work in Gulf more than certain other nationalities. So I think diversity is a reflection of multiple things, and talent supply from different countries or different gender is one of the key ingredients that is very, very peculiar to this region, which, for instance, is not very, very specific or peculiar to the European markets, where you have local talent supply coming and working and joining the workforce. But I think the inclusion is a very, very important point. And therefore, I think the people experience that we create for employees in the organization and what steps are we taking to ensure that that happens, in my view, should be a very, very foundational principle on which we need to build the DNI principle. Because I look at the organization in the retail side, and if I can share some examples, you have a large population coming from only a certain nationality because the supply is like that. So we have people from India or Nepal or Philippines and those kind of stuff. So we have 77 nationalities. But what we do is at the front line, we have not adequate control on the supply of the talent. We have larger control on the supply of the talent at the senior levels, where we can really go on focused hiring, for instance, in the UK market or the European market or whatever market that we want to. So I think there's a splitting of the population segment and building diversity on certain segment by design. On certain segments, we can't design so much because the supply is what it is. And therefore, on senior segment, we are very focused on, for instance, our candidate slate for senior hiring. We are very clear that 50% of the candidate slate, for instance, has to be females or women, and 50% can be male, what we have today at the moment. And that's one of the ways where we say that the candidate slate for senior roles have to be 50-50. Now, we are getting success in few roles, not getting success in few roles, but that's the starting point that we had started about a couple of years back in this organization. And that has helped us to increase the number of women representation at the senior levels in the organization, though it's not yet reached the optimum level. So we are about close to 35% total female population in the company of 24,025 people. But at a store level, we are 46% female population. I would say, honestly, half of them by design, half of them by default because of the talent supply. So I think it's a mix of that. But our focus is, okay, get the people, but what are we doing to keep them included in the workforce in a proper manner? And that's the challenge on which we always try to focus on.
Okay. Yeah, again, a great point you made with respect to the design and the default. So within the organizations, right? So it's just not within the industry. I think even within the organization, you have certain functions, certain businesses, certain areas where you have a rich amount, a rich diversity actually naturally happening and coming in, right? And sometimes in some of the cases, you have seen actually the diversity, the so-called diversity far exceeds the required numbers. Today we see some companies having more than 60%, 70% women in certain functions, right? And therefore, I think one interesting point that you made is that every organization, just not from an industry perspective, really need to look at, how do they design in some places, right? But in other places, how do you sort of deal with the supply, right? And sort of, so you need to have a different strategy. I think that's what you mentioned, which is at the leadership level, at the senior managerial level, at the office level, where you're really looking at a different strategy. But the store level, the strategy is very different based on the supply, the talent supply that you really have. Therefore, what we hear from you is that every organization has to find, even within their own organization, it becomes important that you have different strategies based on the kind of access that you have to the talent. Uh, Monica, from your perspective, and in fact, Priyaranjan spoke about from the retail, but what do you see in the Gulf specifically and with General Motors in a manufacturing automobile sector? What do you see are the reality and the ground situation when you are really looking at building diversity and inclusion in the organization, Monica?
Fortunately, we have been working on demystifying the industry, and General Motors is migrating from being perceived as a manufacturing company to become a tech company. So this as a consequence, becomes more attractive, right? Definitely, there are some roles that are more suitable because of these social constraints and social expectations that we were talking about, right? And so we're aware that at some point in the life of a female and also in a male, that we will need to make some adjustments, right? I mean, it's a genetic thing, right? That the females are going to need to step by or to reduce the number of traveling hours, for example, at some point in their career. We want to be there for them. Or they might be willing, because it's a partner decision with their spouses, to stop their career and then come back. There is where we want to make a difference. We want to onboard ladies that, because of being mothers, because of being entrepreneurs, because of studying abroad or whatever consequence, they want to come back. And this will apply the same. And some solutions were initially designed for only females, but then we found out that we have also athletes, we have men that are entrepreneurs, and also they need to be onboarded again into the private sector, right? So we found there an opportunity. What is true is that the pipeline needs to get bigger so that we can have more talent to choose from and then promote in the organization. Right now, we have a General Motors at 37% of female talent, and out of those, more than 30%, almost 35% of those females are leaders. So they are really making the decisions in the business in our, let's say, like the board, to call it somehow, in our region, our staff meetings. We also have female presence. We have a 30% of females there, giving the opinion, and we try to expose the female talent with the yes, we can attitude. And for that, we need to be mindful that there are some specific needs. The same as we go and do training need detection for marketing, and we decide now it's time to go and study more about digital, right? The same for female. We know that this historical baggage that we have with the social expectations, we need to address it in a different way. So for that, we have designed we call them employee resource group, which are group diversity related groups. It can be people of determination, different ages, nationalities, and we also came across globally with a woman one. And this is reinforced with some women development programs that we have been having every year, where it's not really to talk about cliches. It's to really teach our female talent more about the business, more about how to approach, more about how to make decisions. Not because they cannot do it, because we have successful ladies. For example, our plant manager in our plant in Egypt is a female. Our CEO in the corporation is a female. So, I mean, there are no restrictions, right? But what we want is to make a more of a network so that they can support each other, because it's also the way our brains are wired, right? So, but that should not be enough, or will not be enough, unless we also go to our main allies, which are the men, right? Men and women. All employees in this company are allies to make the talent grow. Doesn't matter the gender. And for us, whenever there's an open position, we try to have at least from 3 candidates, one of them should be a female, but we don't force it, because also that won't be fair for the talent that is already there, right? That trying to prove themselves. So we don't do it like a blind recruiting process. We try to do it so it's more about the capabilities and the filters, and for that we use artificial intelligence in our recruiting process, so that it's not a matter of I hear the name, it sounds like European, it sounds like Nepali, or any other nationality. We just want to highlight the capacity of each person so that really they become their best version. And for that, we take care of the wellness area, right? The developmental portion, the mentoring portion, the exposing the talent, and definitely we mindfully do it for female, but we don't exclude the men.
Okay. Thanks, Monica. I think if I heard you right, what you mentioned is while some of the initiatives that you started for women, but actually men also benefited from it. If I heard you
Yes.
right, I think
Yes.
that's what I heard from you, and I
Yeah.
think that's so common that you've seen that probably the flexible working which started for women, I think everyone enjoys it today, right, irrespective of the gender.
Correct.
And specifically, COVID has made it such a mandatory stuff, right? The work from home, and I think it's really transformed the way that it looks like it's no longer the work from home is a need of women right now, right? The work of from home
Yes.
become the need for everyone, irrespective of the background that they are in.
And if I
Yeah,
sorry,
please.
and if I may compliment also, why now they are for every employee? Because precisely this change, this social expectation change is moving forward because of the role that now males are having in a family, are having in a relationship, right? Because also they want to enjoy their kids, they want to be there, right? They want a parental leave, they want so this more like this equality, let's say, right, in roles, uh, it's really making easier for females to develop themselves and to break those social expectations.
Yeah. Another, I think, as you rightly said, the social construct is also changing. The moment you talk about the social movement, it's not just happening, I think, within the organization, family as well. Now there is a,
Mhm.
at least the greater
True.
need or involvement of men in actually childcare, but still it's not the same that probably as we expect it to be. I think that is changing, and today we feel that men also need to be there as part of caregivers and caretakers. I think that is actually changing big time, Monica. You also spoke about, I think, its inclusion is all about a very having a very comprehensive sort of a focus, right? It is just not about doing some sensitization program. It needs to be rounded off with wellness programs, mentoring, sponsoring, something that you spoke about. You also
Mhm.
interestingly spoke about male allies, right? And Monica, if I can ask you, how do you do this? How do you encourage your men at GM to be allies,
Mhm. Yeah.
Monica? If you could share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. We started our journey more into the setting up mentorship relationship between a male leader, which typically were the ones holding these positions, and a female with potential, right? So we try to partner them. Then we tried reverse mentoring, which means you learn from, someone that is not necessarily higher in the organization, and we also tried to pair them, so the learning was two ways. But truly, where I think we nail it is because we measure our leaders on how inclusive they are, male and female leaders, and we measure these at least 2 or 3 times per year. And also we have our engagement scores that measure inclusion.
Okay.
So diversity we already have. We know we have it, right? Diversity, you just print a report from your payroll and you know you have it. The magic or the art comes on how you really make people feel them best, right? And we have, as I was mentioning, not only gender, but also we believe in age, because we want to retain the knowledge from someone that has been in the company for a longer time. And also we have a portion called lifestyles. You just mentioned the hybrid way of working, right? We don't want someone that is on the other side of the line or in a camera and people in a room feeling left out. So what we do is we created an EDI committee. So this, in addition to training our leaders, measuring our leaders and our environment, and now this EDI committee is not HR or the leaders telling you what to do, are actually employees that volunteer themselves. So they build their own customized solutions. We are just facilitating the path for them.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, what you're mentioning is you have a EDI committee where they actually customize solutions, which is very specific to
For the region.
for the region. That's a great point,
Mhm.
Monica. Right?
Because it's not the same. The EDI committee in America or in Europe South America, the needs are different. For example, we don't have, in Mexico, we won't have the 60 nationalities we were talking about, right? Or in South America. But in North America, there are other type of inclusion, of diversity that we need to include.
Yeah, I think that is what we are constantly actually talking about, right? Has to be a customization that has to be based on need, and we have to find our own journey, right, Monica? So thanks for your insights and inputs. Ranjan, my question to you, I think you mentioned that Landmark has 77 nationalities, right? Now that's a huge diversity that is there, and now you have to layer that over the entire aspect of gender, right? You're looking at specifically this topic about best companies for women. But how do you see this, the entire intersection of people from different countries, right? Women from different countries. Uh, do they see they all have the same kind of expectations? Is it different from career aspiration point of view, from an inclusion perspective point of view? How do you see this differences there? And how do you actually deal with them? So you can't really look at, a set of policies from a one gender lens only, right? But with the respect to gender, then there is this additional layer of people, women from different nationalities, having probably different family values, family systems, and therefore their needs and requirements are very different. So how do you deal with this, Ranjan?
Yeah. So look, there are some differences, but I firmly believe
Okay.
that whether you are coming from India or Prague or Czechoslovakia or US, the need for a human being to be loved and cared and being shown empathy is constant and common,
Hmm.
right? I don't think there's a difference in that. And I think we must understand that principle first, because there are differences in the way we dress, we eat, or we think. We're all different human beings, of course. But I think there is some need which is very common, standard, that every human being has. And depending on the life situation of that particular individual, the career aspirations can be different. And in an economy like the GCC market, where a large portion of the people are expats, there are different drivers which has forced those employees or people to come and work here, and there are different dynamics there.
Yeah.
But the standard one is to be respected, to be given a fair treatment, to be heard, to be empowered, to be loved, cared, etc. I think that's a standard expectation that everybody has. Now, what we do is therefore is we run a campaign in this organization called, a landmark happiness movement, for instance,
Okay.
which is a year-long campaign that we run every year, and it is interspersed with monthly activities where we bring in people from the different nationalities who, for instance, eat different food or like to eat different food, but under one common platform, and we get all the food together. So there's a mixing and intermixing of, let's say, preferences on daily life that they are forced to bring together rather than sitting in the corner in the store or the office. And that helps the other party to understand the differences and really respect those differences as well. So that's one forum that we have created. But I think the basic principle I look at how do we treat different nationalities is, for instance, when we go to Saudi, it's a different culture altogether, different nationality. As long as we understand what are the nuances of that culture and bring it into the policy, but more important, bring it in our day-to-day behavior with them. And I come to one very important point that I think is important is, what is the communication on DNI that the organization is doing on a continuous basis, starting with the leadership. So, for instance, when a leadership goes to a town hall or when a leadership goes to a business meeting, does the leader only talk about, okay, what's my net profit, my revenue, my sales, my cost, my blah, blah, blah? Or in addition to that, does the leader also give a message in a town hall that, hey, guys or girls, we did like this on diversity. We are 77 nationalities, but we are doing well on fair treatment, but you're not doing well here. And I think that messaging is very important. And to be honest with you, completely blunt, we are not very consistent across all the levels here. And that's a campaign in this organization, that can we seriously give a common message on diversity and really believe in that when we are talking about the success of the organization. and not make it a DNI week this month or next month or run a campaign like that. And I think my entire focus will be and is to ensure that the leadership believes in that and makes it as a consistent messaging in the organization, which will allow the organization also to know that if there are 77 nationalities, apart from eating different food, we must be also respected equally, loved equally, and we are really serious about it.
Thank you. I think you made a very powerful point, right? It's basically getting the leadership involved in this entire thing. And I think you also spoke about the aspect of accountability, right? And it can't be just, in your town halls, you focus on the profits, but you also focus on this entire aspect of diversity and inclusion, and the entire aspect of employee experience, experiencing inclusion, belonging. Uh, in fact, there is also a question that is already up there, right? And Priyaranjan, since you made about this point, right, and this could be not just for organizations like GM and Landmark, who's already invested. There is already a leadership buy-in, right? So there is this question: how can we look at convincing a leadership to invest in DEI, right? So how do you do that, Priyanjan? So if your advice to any company or any person who's working in an organization, that person now feels that they really need to get the leadership, what would be your advice to them, Priyanjan?
So, look, on the leadership, we must understand sometimes we have business leaders who would talk the language of financial matrices much more and more, right? I think one of the things that the starting point is that A, if we sincerely believe in the principle of DNI, then what is the impact on the organization matrices? And I feel today there's abundant and umpteen research that proves that if you are a diverse organization, if you really respect everybody, then your productivity levels, your performance levels, your revenue levels, and whatever matrix you want to use are higher than in an organization which is only unipolar or whatever word that we want to use there. So I think the starting point has to be there to ensure that leadership, first of all, gets the point. And I'm starting from a point that the awareness for some leaders may not be there. And let's face it, it's natural for people not to know everything in the world. And if we start with that conversation at the leadership team apex level and say, look, this is the advantage, this is the benefit that we can get, I think then we have taken the first step in the direction of opening the doors for DNI. And then once that is done, and we have an enlightened leadership, so-called, let's say, enlightened leadership, then I think we keep on taking the other steps. And the other steps typically are largely, let's say, in my view, bucketed around two areas. One, what are we doing for the processes that run the organization? So be it your hiring, your performance, your meritocracy or succession or whatever, and whether we are really doing it in an unbiased manner and making sure that there is no, let's say, subjectivity involved as long as nationality or a gender is concerned. And the other one, as I said, is the inclusiveness. So I think it's a journey. We have to take the first step on making sure that the leadership team is agile on the matrix improvement and then build it. And in my view, one must not look at quick wins immediately in the first 1 week, 2 weeks. It's a journey. It will take some time, but over a period of time, I think that it'll come around, and you will see some results. So be it only, let's say, 20 nationalities or 77 nationalities, I don't think there's an issue as long as we are really clear about our intent, the messaging is clear, and we are taking the right steps in the organization.
Thank you. I think thanks a lot for your sort of a roadmap, Priyaranjan, in terms of the way that we really need to look at it. I think what you mentioned is about data research, which really supports very strongly. Then look at the benefits that it can really bring in. Then how do you then do it with intent and sincerity and a commitment, and a very strong communication in terms of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to actually help us start on this journey, right? I think that is something that we hear from you. Monica, one of the things that we really want to ask you, and as an organization, right, which is into diversity for so long, right, and again, there is a lot of questions and organizations still grappling with, and specifically organizations which are either it could be a startup, right, or starting to look at diversity for the first time. And I think both of you spoke about matrices, right? And but sometimes the moment you talk about matrices, then there is a huge pushback that comes in, right? Are we looking at targets? And so if there is target, then are we looking at quota here, right? That is your sort of bracketing certain positions for diversity candidate, right? So this question of should we have inclusion without matrices? Should we have inclusion without having specific targets, right? Or KPIs? So your view on this, Monica, to companies which are really starting off the journey, should they early itself to just start looking at putting some matrices and tracking them, or you first build the culture and then you put that in place? Your thoughts and views, please.
I think you just mentioned it. First, saying that we have an inclusive culture is not enough, because an inclusive culture is just to put in the walls, right? A nice phrase, and maybe just go out and say, now we're going to be inclusive. But really, you need to have the commitment. Now, not every leader is going to buy it in, and not every leader is going to be inclusive. So also, when you start, you need to have the mechanisms where people can also speak up in a confident, like even anonymous way, so that, and that is also a good way to prove we're here to listen, right? We're not here to finger point. We're not here to just go and complain. So that is also important, because if you just leave the inclusion as a nice to have, the nice leaders are going to be, to call it somehow, nice or not nice leaders, but some other leaders might be roadblocks in your journey. So having the culture is not enough, but setting it with the right environment and things like this, um, learning from other companies, learning the theory behind, that will make that your proposal is well rounded. There's a lot of information outside there from really valuable firms that can give you the idea on even how much profit you can make in addition to the current profit if you have a true inclusive and equity environment, and the diversity, including female. And talking about the metrics, I remember that when I was doing one homework for my master's degree, we had the belief, even as a company, that we didn't want to force it. We didn't want to force it with a metric. But what I learned was that the countries that made more progress, like Northern European countries, they started setting up a metric. And a metric doesn't mean a target, right? It's different. Targets, I think they should come once you have a more mature culture. For example, today we have a target of 40% of female across the globe. But we started by measuring it just as a metric, because if you don't see how this is evolving, if you don't see how many females you're attracting, but they leave after 6 months, this is telling you something, right? It's telling you that something is not working. It can be in your recruiting, it can be the profile, it can be the leadership. So measuring, it's important, and then it will come the targets.
I think you nicely simplified it, Monica, right? Because there's a lot of confusion with the moment you talk about numbers, then people start talking about targets and quotas. I think what we heard from you is, yeah, measuring is very important. Put the matrices in place, need not be targets. It actually tells you where you are and the kind of progress that you're making, right? So just track them. Need not be sort
Exactly.
of a target
Exactly.
for you.
Even
Yeah.
even there are going to be areas naturally more suitable for female, and it's not because female prefer those, it's because if you take a look at the number of students that are your pipeline from certain disciplines, you will see that yes, there are more females in engineering STEM disciplines, but if you take a look of how many get graduate, how many are willing to work, how many are willing to work in a tech company or an automotive, the ones that are willing to travel, blah, blah, then your pipeline becomes smaller.
Yeah.
And there is where we are trying to influence in a younger stage in their life. so that they see that there are different opportunities if they go through STEM careers. So, for example, we're partnering with Al Ghurair Foundation, and also we're working with the Arab Youth Center in order to showcase that, I mean, female is not only for finance, right? Or HR or some other areas that are, the bias is there. The same as engineers are not only for being in a plant, right? It doesn't matter. Then you follow your passion. So we're trying to go and partner with them so that we continue demystifying, as I mentioned in the beginning, and this can help us bring them so the needle really starts moving. Another thing is in these forums and these mentoring sessions that I was referring to, also we have openly disclosed that it's okay to learn from mistakes, that we want to learn about the journey of other person, how it was the rookie moment in their early stages in their career. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that complement, it's like a Lego that they try. Some ideas come from internal, some others come from sharing with companies, other companies, smaller, bigger startups, no, and the main portion comes from new generations that as they are exposed to more data, as they are exposed to being more bold, also they know better what they want.
Thank you, Monica. And so, one going back to the entire aspect of matrices. So, it's important to have matrices in place and build a culture. And once you have a very strong culture, and then you could probably look at setting some targets, right? So you're ready for it, you're up for it. Then you have that ecosystem, and then you can actually go for whatever that you really want to do. And I think you also made another great point. It is about not just trying to work, but also in helping the diverse talent. In this case, you spoke about women. How do you sort of work with them at an younger age to sort of look at the wider opportunities, right? It's not just the finance roles or HR roles today. Today, I think because of the various technology, plant is no more a heavy sort of a tough industry to be in or place to be in, right? It is everything has become so much automated, right? It's not truly physical in nature that used to be some 40, 50 years back. And therefore the plants have also changed, but you have still a very strong mindset that plant is only for women. I think we need to break some of the myths, some of the stereotypes and biases that are there, Monica.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some
Correct.
wonderful insights from you. Priyaranjan, on the aspects of matrices, right? And again, with all your experiences, we would love to hear from you in terms of what are some of the matrices that an organization can focus on, right? It need not be the target, right? What are some of the matrices that, for example, you would ideally, or are you already tracking, and you would recommend any person to really look at, right? To really ensure that there is progress, that we are able to really look at not just from a progress perspective, but there is also a deep focus on some of the critical areas, because ultimately what matrices also tells you, but also gives you a clear focus areas, right? These are some of the priorities. There could be hundreds of matrices that we look at, but what are the priorities, and what should be the focus areas, and what are some of the matrices that could really help us give us this focus and priorities here, and then according to you?
So look, what we do is we have kept it slightly simpler format, largely focusing on gender for the moment.
Okay.
So for us, women number in leadership roles is an important matrix for us.
Okay.
Second, women attrition rates are important metrics for us.
Okay.
Third, women attrition rate post maternity breaks is an important metrics for us. Fourth, women engagement rate, especially in certain segments, and we have an automated AI-based tool on which we can target segments to see how they feel about the organization, and that's a very important segment for us. And then, of course, the overall women percentage, which we just is a result of all these steps. So these are the three, four things that we have started tracking. We want to make meaningful progress on these items before we look at any other matrix at the moment. And that's something that is very, very important for us, given the fact that, as I told you, 46% of our population in Saudi Arabia are women. We want to make sure that we do that for a large population base to ensure that these matrices that I've just mentioned are in the green zone. And we're not at green zone everywhere, of course. So our target is that how can we make it to a green zone, which is upper quartile numbers that we have. And that's what we are trying to drive home at. And the women at leadership is an important one because we have felt that clearly influence on policy making is slightly different when we have women in leadership. And therefore, when I was alluding to the point on messaging in the organization and whether leaders are talking about this concept when they do town halls or business meetings or whatever, I firmly believe that in order to ensure that the messaging is also slightly different, we need women at that level to inject that element. So that's again a big focus, and that's why I said that was one of the first matrices I mentioned to you is important for us, and which has led us to take that candidate slate of 50-50 that we spoke about earlier.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you again gave a very simple version for us to really sort of focus on, which is the leadership pipeline, the number of people in the leadership team, looking at the entire aspect of attrition, right? The overall attrition, but also attrition post maternity. And also, I think one interesting point that you spoke about attrition with certain engagements, right? So you're also slightly delving deeper into some of the key areas on which you probably could lose women, right? And therefore, from the broader picture, I think there is also certain areas that you're really focusing on with respect to the entire aspect of inclusion and actually advancement of women. Monica, from your perspective, what are some of the key matrices that an organization could look at? Like while Ranjan spoke about some of this, do you feel is any other thing that you really look at, or some of the same things that you focus on?
Yes, in addition to the ones mentioned, we take a look on recruiting. This means how many ladies are coming in our pipeline and how many are being selected. Also, it applies for internal movements, how many ladies applied, and if there's no female there, which we need an explanation. And it can be we don't have the talent and we don't want to force it, right? We want a fast track for those ladies to achieve their full potential, but also if they don't have, I mean, it's okay. The other one that we have is we measure potential in our employees. So we also want to see how balanced is that. And finally, equality in payment. Whenever we have merit increases or compensation reviews, we build charts looking into not having any difference on same work will not necessarily be equal to same pay, because the pay for us after an initial offer as a fresh graduate, then it's on you because it's based on performance. We have a high philosophy focused on performing. So you earn whatever percentage of salary increase that you're going to be getting. So we have 3 ratings on our performance. So also take a look on low performers, how many female, male, because well, it's the way you manage the talent. So you just want to keep a special eye, not to make it more evident or finger point, because whoever struggles to perform, doesn't matter the gender, we're here to help them.
Yeah. I think again, great points. That you spoke about the internal movements. You spoke about gender pay parity, right? That's a great point that we really look at, because somewhere down the line there is this disparity that is there in terms of the incomes that is there, Monica. And I think why, and it's nice we segue into this entire aspect of matrices and data and tracking, because the best companies for women is all about that. You know, the entire purpose of the best companies for women study is to encourage organizations to start looking at putting matrices in place, actually tracking them, year on year, because simply, as we all know, the saying goes, what gets measured gets done, right? And that's a fundamental philosophy of this entire study. And if you really see, I think you probably both had a look at what Anju Rakesh, my colleague, actually presented the study. He does not really look at too deep into the rankings part of it, right? How do you actually fare? The rankings will be shared with the individual organization which actually participate. The larger idea is to make more and more organization best companies, right? For women, ultimately best companies for all. I think that's the ultimate purpose of this. And again, one key aspect of the entire matrices is that it's just not for you to know where how you're progressing, but how you're progressing with respect to the other companies, right? And therefore, you're also able to benchmark yourself. And at the end of the day, I think one of the questions that really came: how do you go and sort of convince the leadership team? How do you convince the business to invest in certain segments and areas of the diversity? And this is where the benchmarking could also really help you in terms of this is the various initiatives that the companies are doing, this is the kind of impact that we have, and should we really invest this money in this? And therefore, today, what we really see and from our own experiences, of the study specifically, uh, when we launched the study in 2016, I think there has already been a reference. I'm just reiterating that uh, it was 25% women in the 100 best companies, and today it's actually in the last 8 years now it's actually become 35%, and I think it is all due to the intent and the purpose with which now companies are putting matrices in place and actually tracking them and working towards them. And some companies have also, like Monica, as you said, are in a phase where they can actually set targets. There are companies which have set targets that we need to reach 50-50 gender balance by certain years, and they are all making a great progress. I think it all starts with the intent. Put the matrices in place is actually tracking. That is something that we are really focusing on. We are coming close to the session, and I think we touched upon some very important things broadly about the situation in Gulf. We also spoke about what individually companies like you are actually doing. The aspect, one positive aspect, there is also a lot of backing by the government now. There's a lot of focus by the government and really looking at it. We also spoke about some of the matrices versus target and how can we really approach it. And you also gave some great insights on some of the matrices that companies that can actually sort of look at. And I think you also spoke about some very important aspect of matrices, mentoring, being sort of how do you encourage more allies to actually be part of this entire gender balance initiative. I think we had some great learnings. What we are going to really round it off this conversation is, and Priya Ranjan, you spoke about this, right? One aspect of it is, yes, the leadership buy-in is there, right, with respect to the entire aspect of diversity. But the bigger challenge is how do you actually cascade the communication? How do you get people involved? In fact, there is also one question posed by one of the audience, the participant, which is DI journey is like a moving, it's like moving a giant wheel. Can we get employees and managers who are like hubs and spokes in the wheel to travel with us in this journey? Because ultimately it has to happen. Therefore, how do you cascade this communication across all levels, right? How do you get them involved? Right, while you can have arrive at the policies, right, at the group level or the company level, while you can put matrices at the group level, while you can put those, while you can track them, but it has to really, it can only happen if you get, or you're going to get all your ups and spokes actually involved, right, collaborating and working with each other to do this. So first to you, Priya Ranjan, how do you do this, bring this culture of inclusion, just not to the leadership level? How do you get the different departments and functions actually involved, collaborating, working with each other, and how do you sort of take it across all levels?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is that the people or the drivers of, let's say, DNI are not only the people who are at the senior level, but across all levels. So, first of all, how do we integrate each level of so-called management into this culture of DNI or inclusiveness? And my view is that the organization is actually structured around work areas, and
Okay.
therefore somebody who leads a work area is the best ambassador for DNI for that particular work area. So
Okay.
there are two things. One, how do we first of all increase the awareness of that work area leader, be it a TL level, team leader level, or a senior team leader, or whatever we call it, depending on the organization? how do we increase the awareness level of that segment of population who are leading teams around DNI principle, number one. Second, which is a very important aspect that we have now started doing, what's the consequence management of me as a team leader doing DNI or not doing DNI? So if I don't do anything, nothing changes in my life. But no, if the consequences in performance management, if the consequences in reward and recognition, it's different to a team leader which does DNI in the proper sense or somebody who does not. If there's no difference, then nothing will change. There has to be some difference. So what we do is at a store level, for instance, or at a level, people who definitely respect DNI principle from a governance and running perspective are in our bucket of so-called high potential, are in a bucket of so-called people who should be recognized in a town hall, should be elevated, etc., etc. So there's a distinct culture of showing a consequence management around those team leaders. So that's where we build this culture of saying that this is important, and therefore at any level of team management or work leadership, we can show that. So we have been doing that again. And I said the constant messaging by the senior leadership when they do that is a third element that I would say that allows us to keep on saying that, okay, not only my work leader, but the Apex leadership also talks about the same thing. I think we'll have to ensure that the full chain is geared to follow the principles. And that's where we have some challenges and some tough, let's say, moments when every chain is not moving like a well-oiled machinery. But I feel that it's not so difficult and unsurmountable if we are really at it,
Okay.
right? I think sometimes if we pause or we get dejected because something is not moving, then I think it takes a backseat. But if we push that chain, the chain will move. Not today, tomorrow it will move.
Excellent. I think great points. I think you get some clear three steps, right? One is create an awareness at the work area leader level, right? Create that awareness, build that competency in them, right? I think that is what you mentioned. The second is the consequence. I think the nice word, nice terminology that you use, the consequence management, right? I think it's like a cause and effect, right? So the consequent management, I think that's a great point that you really mentioned. And the third point, I think it's completely driven by the leadership team. They have to walk the talk, right? So somebody to we work with you to really sort of be inspired, right? And inspired by the leader, by the way that they are actually setting the agenda and actually living that agenda, right? And I think great points that you really made, Monica. So how does it happen at GM, right? And again, you are again a global organization, right? Just not in the Gulf, and therefore, how do you do this? At the from the global to the regional level, the country level,
Mhm,
and within the country, then you have the different businesses and the functions.
mhm.
So how do you handle this? How do you cascade this, the sort of the vision and value of diversity across the organization?
For us, we call it be inclusive is one of our corporate behaviors. And since day one that you joined the company, even before, we try to find this cultural fit also with the organization. And part of probably the questions that we ask during the first interview is like are related to these experiences among inclusion and equity. Then once you're on board during your first week, you're going to be receiving a training that starts with a video from our CEO saying there's no negotiable, right? We want to become the most inclusive company in the world. So when this is the opening and then it's like, and welcome to General Motors, right? It sets the tone. In the stage where we are, but it was not from overnight, let's say, our we now have this common language. So in whenever there's a session, it will be something that each one of us will be trying to bring to the table. So for example, we start the meeting with either a safety message or a be inclusive message. So that sets, again, right, the beginning of the meeting. It doesn't matter if it's an all people meeting or if it's just a small team meeting, we will start there. And then consciously, all the leaders, we agreed because we're committed, right? Not only because we're measured, but we're committed to whenever we hear any comment that it's not inclusive, whenever we see, something, we are responsible to raise our voice. To witness something and not raising our voice will not be acceptable for a leader. And this is spread across not only leaders, right? But it's more strict with leaders because, as here my colleague was saying, it's really the leadership that is going to make the change, right? Walking the floor in a manufacturing plant, right? Walking the floor in one of our dealerships. You cannot be one person inside our facilities and another one working from home and another one when you're with the direct client. So now it's part of our language. And as I was saying, there are consequences that can come if you don't follow the behavior. We have another 7 behaviors as well as important, but specifically for this one, we build campaigns in order to showcase how we embrace diversity and also testimonies of how a team with diversity, not only gender, so we try to highlight gender, nationalities, cultural backgrounds, how my team, as a leader, what they bring to the table, what even myself as a Mexican I'm bringing to the table, that definitely is going to be a different perspective because we were born in different parts of the world. So we try to always highlight that. And finally, we have in our recognition tool, which is an electronic platform, those behaviors are the way we recognize our peers, our teams, or our leaders. And be inclusive is there. So it can be because you innovated something, because you were an extraordinary team member, but also it can be because you're inclusive. And part of your individual developmental plan or annual reviews, or as now we call it quick connect, which is every 3 months you go into the system and do a checkpoint. They have an option to select how every person is doing, if they need to improve something, and the behaviors are there. So as you can see, it's a language. Now we started just with setting up the expectations, then we aligned our recognition system, then everything. So now it's more of a common language.
Great. I think, Monica, what you simply, I think one simple thing that you really sort of said is it has to be done on a daily basis. You
Yes.
know, every meeting, every
Yes.
conversation. I think it's very important, right? You can't choose to be, and I think that's what you mentioned. You can't choose to be inclusive, choose to have behaviors at different locations, right? At home, the plant, at the dealership level. I think it has to be a value which needs to be imbibed, ingrained, right? It needs
Yes.
to be part of your DNA, and therefore you are,
Mhm.
inclusive in every sense of the word, irrespective of the location, irrespective of the people that you really meet. And
That's a great point, because it doesn't matter if I, for example, I travel to Europe tomorrow to the Zurich office or to Australia, I will expect the same behavior,
yeah,
right? I will expect everybody to be respectful. And for that, we spend a lot of time trying to create a safe environment.
excellent, excellent. So we are coming to the close of this, I think, wonderful session. I think we can go on and on. There are so many interesting insights that actually keeps coming, and great insights that we already had. But unfortunately, in the interest of time, in the interest of your time, and you made time for this in between all your busy schedules, coming and sharing some great points, insights, the way that you really personally looked at diversity as well. I think there's been tremendous learning for each of us here, for those who all witnessed this panel discussion. And we would love to hear from you more. We'll sort of create such opportunities in the future as well. We would actually, through this particular program, I think what we really sort of, one thing that we really wanted to communicate very strongly is the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion does not just happen automatically, right? It needs sincere commitment, intent, and purpose. And for that, another important thing that we really need to look at is put some matrices in place and actually start tracking them, right? And for the matrices to happen, for you to really make progress, have some initiatives which will really work for you, because just putting the matrices is not enough, right? That's another point. Then it also really looks at the leadership actually walking the talk, driving home at every instance, right? It cannot be just at celebratory events or sudden day. It could be an everyday basis, something that we're really looking at as key aspects of it. And therefore we're able to sort of ensure that inclusion, diversity inclusion becomes the DNA of the organization, right? And I think we had some tremendous insight. Thanks once again for all your sharing. I would like to also thank the entire participant, all the participants patiently hear what we had to say, and hopefully we all were able to share um, uh, some interesting sort of data insights for you to take home and go back and do something that you can sort of implement in your own organization. So thanks once again, Priya Ranjan. Thanks a lot, Monica, for you being here, spending time with us.